Salve amici. I'm here in Rome, Roma Mundi, Rome, the head of the world, Roma Eterna, the eternal Rome, the group of students from Notre Dame. We're taking them on a pilgrimage to visit the various sites connected with the Virgin Mary. We just finished up at Santa Maria Antiqua after going through the Roman Forum, addressing the symbolism and the history of its various sites, and I thought I'd give a bit of a recapitulation now for you all on YouTube. Behind me is, of course, the very famous amphitheatre of Flavian, dedicated by the Emperor Vespasian in 80 AD and completed in consecutive stages by his sons Titus and finally Domitian, better known as the Colosseum. Of course, if you've watched Gladiator 2, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The Colosseum was a space where the gladiatorial games would take place. Some brutal conflicts that took place there between the various heroes admired by the Roman public, although they met their fates, many of them in a terrible way, on the floor of the central space of the Colosseum, either to accolade and acclaim if the hero was victorious, or if someone managed to be bested and they sprawled out on the floor, the boos of the crowd might compel the emperor to give the thumbs down, and so that hero would be dead. It's got the name Colosseum because the Colossus of the Emperor Nero was on this spot, just here, in front of the Arch of Constantine, which was built in the 4th century AD, the early 4th century, to commemorate Emperor Constantine the Great's victory over his rival Emperor Maxentius at the Battle of Pons Milvius in 312. Several centuries earlier, there was a giant golden statue of the Emperor Nero, the Mad Emperor, the last of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, as the god Sol, the sun god, wearing a radiant crown and holding a rudder atop of the globe. And so when Constantine had this arch commissioned, this triumphal arch, the central rounded archway would frame, of course, the statue of the Colossus of Nero, thereby appropriating it for Constantine. He'd no longer designated Nero, it designated Constantine. And part of the reason why we know that the emperor did this is because in Constantinople, which was his capital, his new Rome that he built on the shores of the Bosphorus, in 325 he began the building work. It wasn't completed and inaugurated or founded until 330. In the very center of the city, in his forum named after himself, there was a porphyry column in the center of the forum, a circular forum, atop which the emperor depicted himself as the god Apollo, wearing a radiant crown with a spear and a globe in hand. The Emperor Constantine is the ruler of the world in the visage of Apollo. Now, that might not gel well with Constantine's reputation as the first Christian emperor. Indeed, around the same time that this triumphal arch was dedicated to him in 315 AD, Constantine was building churches on top of the major martyria, or burial sites of the martyrs, circling the city of Rome, because they're the martyrs of Christ, those who died selflessly in service to Christ in their belief to him, were buried in cemeteries that were on the outskirts of the main city. Saints like Agnes and Lawrence and Sebastian, Constantine erected basilicas over their tombs, the most famous of which, of course, was St. Paul outside the walls, and also St. Peter's Basilica, the very first one that wasn't rebuilt until the 15th century by Pope Julius III. Began the construction work on St. Peter's Basilica, the new one which was completed in the 17th century, the entire colonnaded atrium and everything else. So Constantine was instrumental from this point of view. Even in that statue that he built of himself, that he erected of himself atop the porphyry column in Constantinople, was embedded with relics that were associated with Christianity, like nails taken from the cross that Christ was crucified upon, and so on and so forth. So it's an example of syncretism, of the mixing of the various religions in the empire around that time. looking at the Colosseum and the triumphal Arch of Constantine, which is undergoing renovation works, it's very interesting that when this arch was erected in 315, 3 years after Constantine defeated his rival Emperor Maxentius, 3 years after Constantine defeated his rival Emperor Maxentius, it was in 312 that he ostensibly had the vision of the cross in the sky, with the words "En tutonica" or "In hoc signo vinces" in Latin, "By this sign conquer." According to Eusebius's Life of Constantine, published in the late 330s, he asked those around him what this sign meant, and there were Christian priests around who told him that this was basically the sign of the Christians. From that point on, Christ put the Chi Rho, the first two initials of Christ's name in Greek, upon his shields and standards, and from them onwards never lost a battle. Here opposite the Colosseum, you have the temple dedicated to Roma and Venus, which was built by Domitian, who was the last of the Flavian dynasty, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, who I mentioned earlier. Of course, that's where we get the name, the amphitheatre of Flavian, which was attributed to the Colosseum. It received the name of the Colossus of Nero after the Colossus was lost to history. So we're inside the Roman Forum now at the top, and I'm just going to take us through. You can see the apse there in what remains of the Basilica style, which is a rectangular style building that was dedicated as a temple to Roma, personification of Rome, and Venus, or Aphrodite, the goddess of love. The main way of the Colosseum is to my left down there. Opposite you see some of the palaces that will eventually culminate in the Palatine Hill, where we get the name palace from in English. But I'm going to take you through and have a look at some of the other monuments that obviously they unfold in various consecutive chronological stages. The Roman Forum, which is where we're heading to now, was established in the 6th century BC, at least a century and a half after the mythical founding of Rome by Romulus. The famous brothers Romulus and Remus. Romulus killed Remus, and Rome was founded in fratricide. It was at the very northeastern corner of what's now the Roman Forum, at the Comitium, where Romulus, according to various Latin historians, invited the inhabitants of Rome, obviously Rome is named after Romulus, to deposit first fruits from their lands, thus bringing together all of the different ethnicities that were here. But that was in the mid-700s. Just after Romulus, you get 7 consecutive kings of Rome, beginning with Numa Pompilius, the first king of Rome, who was considered like a sacred duty to be king of Rome, and he had appointed another Numa as the Pontifex Maximus, the greatest bridge maker between heaven and earth. This other Numa began the priesthood of the Pontifex, or the Pontiff, let's say, the Great Bridge, a title that almost a millennium later would be given by the Emperor Theodosius I to the popes, Pope Damasus. And later in the decretals of Gelasius, you'll see the Pope referred to as Pontifex Maximus because of the role of the papacy as successor of St. Peter. The Pope is the successor of St. Peter, who was martyred here in Rome, and upon whom the Catholic Church is sort of founded in Christ's name and for Christ. You see that he takes on the role of the great bridge maker between heaven and earth. This building here to the right, let's just get a better view of it, that's more of what used to be the temple of Romulus and Venus, culminating in the church Santa Francesca Nova. Now, Santa Francesca Nova was built in the 9th century as Santa Maria Nova, named after St. Mary, the Mother of Christ, in order to compensate for and replace Santa Maria Antiqua, which is inside the Roman Forum to the east. Basically was destroyed. It was built in the 6th century, but it was partially destroyed in the 9th by an earthquake. So Santa Francesca was originally named Santa Maria Nova, a new church dedicated to St. Mary that was later named after St. Francesca. So Having a look here in 80 AD, the Emperor Titus, the son of Vespasian, who began work on the Colosseum, erected this monumental arch. It's kind of a tragic arch, this one, because it commemorates the expulsion of the people of Israel. Commemorates the expulsion of the people of Israel from Judea, the Roman province, in 70 AD. That, of course, led to the Jewish diaspora with various communities spread throughout the world. You eventually get Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews in various parts of the world, and developments in, let's say, Judaism, apart from the temple, which was destroyed in 70 AD by Titus and his forces. You see that kind of pointed to with the looting of the temple and the taking of the menorah there and various other items. The temple's destruction was even prophesied in the Gospel according to St. Matthew. So it's quite a tragic history that's inaugurated from there onwards. But if you look at these columns that are keeping up the architrave, they are more like pilasters, so they're not actually load-bearing. They are in the Corinthian style, close to the central arch of the column. We can see that from the acanthus spirals on the capitals, and also in the Ionic style as well at the very top of the capitals. These are different capital orders appropriated by the Romans from ancient Greece, and you would have seen them on the Colosseum as well. The three orders, Ionic, Corinthian and Doric, which is just a flat base, were there too. So let's keep on with our walk through the forum. You see the Roman eagle at the center there, just underneath the concave, the kind of barrel of the central arch of the Arch of Titus. See some of the work here that's been done. 2,000 years and still standing. Now, coming into our view is the Basilica of Maxentius, there next to Santa Francesca Nova. That monumental basilica was appropriated by Constantine after he defeated his rival Emperor Maxentius at the Battle of Pons Milvius in 312 AD. And he erected a monumental statue of himself in the central barrel vaulted arch, which you can see there. A statue of himself as Jupiter, basically. He was holding a giant staff and a globe in his hand. The remnants of that statue were discovered in the 16th century, a colossal head of the Emperor Constantine, a hand, two hands I think, part of a leg, 2 feet. They are now in the Capitoline Museum, which is in that direction over there beyond the forum, near where the ancient hill of the Capitoline was, that overshadowed the forum with its great temple to Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter best and greatest, the central temple of Rome. The hill of the Capitoline was given the name of Capitol because the workers who were excavating the site for Tarquin the Elder, the final king of Rome, just before the beginning of the Roman Republic in 509 BC, they discovered a human head with its features intact, which was considered auspicious for the Romans, that Rome would become Caput Mundi, the head of the world. So of course after that you get the Republican period inaugurated in Rome, which lasts for about 500 years until in the 1st century BC Julius Caesar takes the position of consul, main representative of the Roman people to the Senate, towards himself permanently, becomes dictator and begins the empire. I guess it begins officially after his death, when his nephew Octavian Caesar, later named Augustus, or most revered one, begins to accrue to himself divine honors, much like any Egyptian pharaoh or Alexander the Great would have in previous civilizations, Egyptian and Greek. So from Augustus, that is Octavian Caesar, Julius Caesar's adopted nephew onwards, all Roman emperors were called Augustus, most revered one, and were worshipped as gods in their lifetimes, which put them at odds with the Christians, who, Christ was born during the reign of the Emperor Augustus, and of course Christians only worship Jesus as God, so they wouldn't worship the emperor as a god, and they were persecuted for that very reason. and put to death as martyrs. Now, I don't know if my colleague Renee Collerai wants to get into the video, just very briefly. Hi Renee. Hi. We've had a good time today, haven't we?
We have. We had a great time.
Yeah, I'm doing like a bit of a spiel for YouTube.
Excellent.
We're covering some of the things that we've addressed. So
Excellent.
I just
the kids loved it.
Oh well, thanks Renee. See you later on. Renee, thank you. Let's turn around and go this way. Oh Renee, it's not live, so I can edit you out. Don't worry. If you don't want to, okay. Cheers. You see some of the remnants of porphyry columns that would have kept up part of the Basilica of Constantine. Now, originally the Basilica, when Maxentius built it in the early 4th century, would have been oriented in this way, but Constantine changed the orientation that way when he placed the monumental statue of himself under the barrel vault of that central monumental arch. There were Corinthian capitals as well there as pilasters, one of which was moved to the, I think the one on the right, was moved to the piazza in front of Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the main Marian Basilican churches in Rome that we'll see eventually. Now these semi-porphyry columns here are important because porphyry, as a durable, enduring material taken from Egypt, was associated with royalty traditionally throughout the Roman Empire, leading into Byzantium, in the Eastern Roman Empire as well, where emperors were buried in porphyry sarcophagi, both in the ancient Roman Empire, in the Elder Rome, and in the New Rome. And in the Vatican Museum, we'll see the sarcophagus of St. Helen, which also was porphyry. So it's a regal colour. You know, even Christ, who inverted kingship with his humble self-sacrificial death on the cross and his defeat of death on the third day, re-signified the notion of kingship by being draped in the purple of mockery when he was crucified. It's a royal colour. It's used by the church as well. We're walking down the Sacra Via, the Sacred Way, a road that was taken by generals, by emperors, who, when victorious in campaign somewhere, would bring their bounty, bring their loot through this sacred road in order to culminate, after circling the Palatine and various other important places in the Forum, they would culminate at the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus at the Capitoline Hill. That's where they would culminate. James is giving me permission to record him. He's one of the students, so I'm basically doing, it's not live, it's just a recap of everything that we've been doing, James, for YouTube. I don't know why that's blocking out whenever I turn it around.
It's a true joy and honor to be an audience. What a amazing experience.
See, all of the people I'm bumping into are giving me positive reviews, so you have to like and subscribe to the channel.
Like and subscribe, as I have. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. You won't regret it.
He wants HDs.
I'm not getting paid for this as well. I'm not getting paid for
What an endorsement, James. Thanks, mate. All right, well, here we've come up to the Temple of Romulus that was built in the 4th century by the same Maxentius, from whom Constantine appropriated the basilica that we just saw. Now, the Temple of Romulus is not named after Romulus, the founder of Rome. It's named after Maxentius' son, who died prematurely, Romulus. And in the 6th century AD, after the Christianization of this space, it was converted into a church dedicated to Saints Cosmas and Damian. You see their Corinthian capitals on top of porphyry columns, kind of framing the entrance into the church with elaborately decorated marble architrave. It's a rotunda. Hopefully we will be able to get into the church at some stage and record some of the wonderful mosaics within. Next to it is the temple, 2nd century AD temple of Antoninus and Fausta, with a 17th century Baroque church on the inside, dedicated to San Lorenzo, an early Christian martyr, very famous for being roasted alive during the persecution. So you can see that the Corinthian capitals adorning those monolithic granite and marble columns there, holding up the architrave. The church has been built inside the temple fully intact, which is pretty cool. Of course, it would have been in ruins when it was built, when the church was built in the 17th century. Having a look now at the Sacra Via, we will see to our left the Regia. The Regia is the king's house. built by Numa Pompilius, the first king of Rome, permanent residence of the king, who also had sacerdotal or priestly-like ministry, separated from Pontifex Maximus. It was Augustus later on who merged all of the roles, like Pontifex Maximus, high priest, and he was the main priest of most of the major priesthoods. He subsumed them within his own person. Are you okay to... Oh, I'm just going to do this. Okay, cool.
I'm the audience.
Okay, right, thanks, James. So he subsumed them into himself later on in the 1st century AD, about 600 years, 500 years after Numa Pompilius, and appointed the other Numas, Pontifex Maximus. Now, this regia was connected to the house of the Vestal Virgins, who Augustus made himself patron of as Pontifex Maximus. It was traditionally the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest, the bridge maker between heaven and earth, who was patron of the Vestal Virgins, who in their temple dedicated to Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, the Roman equivalent of the Greek Hestia. You can see the Corinthian capitals and fluted marble columns here, holding up part of an architrave. This would have been a round structure made of marble, and it would have kept alive the eternal flame, which symbolized Rome's permanence and was associated with Vesta, with Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. There would have been an aperture in the roof through which the smoke generated by the eternal flame, symbolizing the goddess Vesta, would have flowed, thereby connecting Rome with heaven and symbolizing its eternity. The temple of the Vestal Virgins was taken care of by the Vestals, 6 of which were functioning at any given time. They were taken from between the ages of 6 and 10 to enter their ministry here for the people of Rome, to tend the sacred fire associated with this very important goddess Vesta that symbolized Rome's permanence. Here is the main courtyard of the atrium of the House of the Vestal Virgins. The house is over there. This is the atrium. There are some statues here to the left that belong to some of the main Vestal Virgins, who had a matron that would teach them how to tend the fire of the Vestal Virgins. After they were enrolled into this particular, let's say, female priesthood, they had a 30-year service. So they were supposed to remain virgins for 30 years, tending the sacred fire. If they transgressed their vows, they were basically bricked up in a small room and given one last meal and were starved to death. Anyone who violated a Vestal Virgin in such a way was put to death immediately. You can see one still has their head intact. We saw the heads over there in the House of the Vestal Virgins earlier. Maybe we'll walk over and have a look briefly at the heads of the Vestal Virgins, because there's also a statue of Numa Pompilius, the first king of Rome, over there. You can see that it was quite an elaborate structure. There were bakeries as well, which helped to provide sacred bread and meals for various sacrifices that would take place, and workshops where they provided for the city. Now, I didn't mention that the Vestal Virgins were the only permanent residents of the Forum. They were allowed to live here. No one else was allowed to live inside the Roman Forum. There's another intact statue of a famous Vestal, Flavia Epublicia. Okay, let's go up there. I don't know if I might have butchered that. I don't know. There's some capitals here. See some Doric capitals. No, they're Ionic order capitals. And we'll wander over here. This is the House of the Vestal Virgins. Millstones that were used. A mill. Okay, used for various food and water production. Here we go. Here's the statue. I don't know if you can see from the reflection of Numa Pompilius and one of the Vestals. But let's keep going. There are some heads of Vestal Virgins as well associated with this side. See the holes in the brickwork? You'd see them on the Colosseum on its facade as well. That's because marble was maybe fixed onto some of these surfaces. Usually when you see holes in Roman brickwork, that's what it symbolizes. You You can see the tops of St. Cosmas and Damian, the Basilica Maxentius from another angle, the sun falling on it, looks very nice. The temple of Antoninus and the Faustina, and of course the church, the 17th century church of San Lorenzo behind it. And then we move back to what remains of the temple of the Vestal Virgins. Now, those enormous fluted Corinthian capitals there, columns with the architrave, are what's left of the temple of Castor and Pollux, very famous brothers of Lydda, fathered by Zeus. One of them, I think it was Castor, who was fathered by Zeus. They're associated with horsemanship and were very popular gods, deities worshipped in the ancient Roman world. So we're making our way out of the atrium Vestae, as it's known, the central garden, central space. Of course, Roman houses were often created like atriums. We've got another view here of the inside, the interior of the temple of the Vestal Virgins. Okay, we'll come around and we will make our way towards the end of the forum. This is of course a very rushed walkthrough because I literally just did this with a group of students. How long were we here for? Maybe half an hour ago.
What was that, sorry?
How long did we finish? Half an hour ago? And we were here for maybe 2 hours or something?
Might have been half an hour ago.
20
minutes ago?
20 minutes ago. We started outside. James has come along.
Over 2.5 hours?
Yeah, 2.5 hours.
Well over 2.5.
I think so. Okay, this structure there are remnants in marble over there that belong to an arch that would have been built by the Emperor Augustus. And he's built it right in front of what was a temple dedicated to Julius Caesar, the first dictator of Rome, deified after his death, immediately after his death by the Roman Senate. The senators' decision to betray him altogether and have him murdered on the Ides of March backfired tremendously. The first triumvirate that Caesar led with Pompey, and I always forget the other guy, came to an end under him, and subsequently when he was murdered by the senators, it was Brutus, his adopted son in a way, much like Octavian, who stabbed him the final time, put in the killing blow. According to Septimius, Caesar was heard to mutter, "Kesi teknon," and "you my child," when that final stab wound was dealt to him. That was in 44 BC. He was deified after his death. Mark Antony would have given his speech at the Curia Julia, the Senate house over there, which commemorated Caesar. I think I'm not going to bother the people who are there. I'm going to just extend this out and you'll be able to see inside, hopefully, the space where Julius Caesar's body was burnt on a funeral pyre, as Mark Antony delivered the funeral speech that was immortalized by Shakespeare's play on Julius Caesar. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I've come not to praise Caesar but to bury him," or something like that. Mark Antony's rhetoric leading to the glorification of Caesar thereafter. The second triumvirate then formed with Octavian, later becoming Augustus, Lepidus and Mark Antony, but that was also dissolved when Octavian took out his revenge on everybody and basically set himself up as the first real Roman emperor to be deified, to be made a god in his lifetime. Augustus, the most revered one, as he wrote in his epitaph, which he distributed throughout the empire upon his death, "Sacrosanctus esse in perpetuum," I am holy for eternity, I'm sacred for eternity. Of course, the Christians could not worship the emperor as a god, and so that lasted for centuries until Constantine, whose triumphal arch we saw earlier and whose statue we saw was put in the Basilica Maxentius. Constantine kept the title Pontifex Maximus and allowed himself to be worshipped in some parts of the empire, but he built so many churches. He ended up being baptized into Christianity on his deathbed. The wrong form of Christianity, subordinationist Arianism, where Christ was seen as not fully divine. Nevertheless, depending on how you arrange the sources in relation to the Emperor Constantine, you end up with a different portrait of this figure. don't think there was any reason for him to ring Roman churches between 315 AD and the late 320s, while abandoning the city politically and moving to Constantinople to build his new Rome, unless he had some sincere conviction in relation to Christianity. This is the Basilica Aemilia, 2nd century BC, the remnants of which you can see. They're doing some public archaeological works on it, which I think is really good to give the public a sort of idea of what the discipline and the work of archaeology is like. That there is the Curia Julia, refurbished in the 3rd century AD, but it's much older. It's the Senate House. Let's have a look over here briefly. That column that you see right there is the last monument to be placed in the Roman Forum, the column of Phocas, the Byzantine emperor, who visited Rome in 608 AD. It's a fluted column with a Corinthian capital. Smaragdus, the prefect of the city, had this erected in his honor. No other monuments were later placed in the Forum in an imperial sense. He had churches built, but nothing like an imperial monument. Phocas was also the emperor who gifted the Pantheon to Pope Boniface the something or other, maybe the third, in 608 AD as well, and it became a church dedicated to Santa Maria ad Martires, Mary and the Martyrs. And so there's a connection between this column and the Pantheon as well. Over there in the distance, the Basilica Julia, built by Julius Caesar, refurbished after it was burnt down by his nephew Octavian Augustus. There you see the massive arch of Septimius Severus, a triumphal arch, built before Constantine's one, the one dedicated to Constantine, just next to the Colosseum. Fluted, you can see both Ionic and Corinthian columns at the top. Okay, all this area is being restored, so we have to backtrack a little bit because I want to culminate at the Rostra, and once we culminate there, that'll be the end of our brief look at the Roman Forum. You can see the remains of the Temple of Castor and Pollux and the Temple of the Vestal Virgins just ahead, as well as the place where Julius Caesar was burnt on a funeral pyre, and they built a temple in his honor. That was Augustus who built the temple in Julius Caesar's honor. Let's walk these roads and try to quicken up the pace so that we can get to the end of the forum. I'll turn to me so that I'm not recording random people. I'm sure they don't appreciate it. I'm just trying to get the monuments anyway. Let me just turn through here. Okay, off in the distance over there, you see that it's the Church of Santa Maria Antiqua. That's what I wanted to show you. If I can get behind this sun, I will show you also the Palace of Septimius Severus, which is, of course, from which you could oversee the triumphal arch that he erected in the 3rd century. He's also very important, Septimius Severus, because he refurbished Byzantium, upon which Constantine, 50-60 years later, would build Constantinople in the 330s. So it was already a Roman-looking city that Constantine found there. The Hippodrome in Constantinople, which was modelled on the Circus Maximus here in Rome, which is nearby actually, it's quite close to here, one of the main stadiums for chariot racing, etc. The Hippodrome was modelled on the Circus Maximus, including the incorporation of obelisks into its central spina, or its the area around which the horses would race. Okay, it's another view of the column of Phocas right there. And behind it, the Temple of Saturn. You can see those giant columns with Ionic order capitals at the top, holding up an architrave. What's left of it anyway, there's not much left of it. But that would have been enormous. Saturn, of course, being the Roman equivalent of Kronos, god of time, of eternal time. One of the Titans who was overthrown by Zeus, by Jupiter, who would have had his temple behind this building at the back here, on the hill of the Capitoline. That's the Capitoline behind there. Obviously the temple is within the Capitoline museums now, the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. You're not going to get a view of it from here, but it's worthwhile to do this trek and to see some of these monuments. Okay, turn it back to me so that I don't upset anyone as I'm walking through. We'll try to get to the Rostra, the main platform for public speaking in the Roman Forum, from where emperors, senators, magistrates would speak publicly. There it is, the Rostra. This is the main public platform. You can see it's kind of rectangular. Upon this platform, during Augustus' reign, in the late 1st century BC, early 1st century AD, he erected his Miliarium Aureum, a golden millstone, bronze pillar, a marble pillar encased in bronze that measured the distances to all of the cities in the Roman Empire. And on this raised platform here was the concave sort of egg-like marble structure that symbolized Rome as the umbilicus of the city of Rome. That was the umbilicus of the city of Rome, modeled upon the Delphic omphalos this year, which was in Delphi and symbolized Delphi as the navel of the world. Basically, in Delphi, the god Apollo appeared, restraining the chaos entity Typhon, and upon the place where he restrained this chaos entity, which was like a dragon-like entity, Typhon and Python are related. A temple was built in Apollo's honor. Apollo is the son of Zeus, of course, son of Jupiter. The Pythoness, the prophetess, would give her oracles there, prophecies about what would happen to people if they came and consulted the priesthood that tended to her. The Pythoness might have been getting high off of the fumes emanating from beneath the rocks there, we don't know. But definitely was a place visited not only by Greeks, but by Romans too. And there was an egg-like stone placed there that designated Delphi as the Omphalos this year. When the Romans built the Ubilicus Urbis Romae, they equated the city with the world. They replaced ye with urbis, city, right? So the city was the world, and the umbilical of the world was here in the center in Rome. Okay. A place where Saturn, the god, was worshipped, where the distances to all of the cities in the empire were measured. You can see off in the distance over there Septimius Severus' palace and the Basilica Julia. Okay, the sun is blocking us out. I think I'm going to end our little spiel on the Roman Forum here and maybe go into Santa Maria Antiqua briefly and do a shorter video from there. Thanks.